Okay, are we working? Yes, we are. All right. Hello, my name is Matt. I am finishing up my social working degree here at Roberts Wesleyan. Um, and tonight's topic is going to be a little bit controversial for our religion and spirituality presentation. Tonight, I want to talk about this idea of females in a leadership position in a church setting. Um, this idea and concept of females in a leadership position has been around for hundreds and hundreds of years. Females have been in a leadership position in religion and spirituality, but to change the shift of cultural norms is an identity that I'm focusing on tonight's presentation about. Um, the first aspect is when anyone attends a religious service of any type between Christianity, Roman Catholicism, um, Buddhism, Islam, any religious statue, typically a male figure is the leader of the church or of the parish or of whatever religion or spirituality that is in that setting. And why is that? We look at religion and spirituality and how much it's changed throughout the years. Why is it still that a male figure is in that setting? First, I look at cultural and we look at gender stereotypes. One of the articles states how gender stereotypes is very much playing a role in the church setting. Women still have this traditional route of supporting the male in charge of the church, but not so much physically being a leader of the church. And we also look at how society's changed. We see how much advancements we made outside of the religion and spirituality with cultural norms, with homosexuality marriage and African Americans' privileges and women's rights. We have such a strong social interventions that we've changed throughout history, but this idea of religion and spirituality has not shifted. And we're gonna talk a little bit more about that. One of the articles that I read stated that women that do lead in the traditional church setting have a lower number of social media posts. And as we just talked about, things have changed. Technology's grown. Currently sitting here on my Mac recording this. But to have this idea that social media is affecting how religion is played out, the engagement levels, the article states, is lower due to the fact that a woman is in charge. Why is that? Why would a woman affect the church setting and social media? There's another one saying that churches are having issues with women in leadership positions if they post on social media. They don't want a woman posting on social media. They want a male figure. They want a traditional figure, male figure in the church leading, and they want a female to stick to their traditional role in the religion and spirituality. Another article that I read, women are more likely to lead small churches. So this tradition and this cultural norms have shifted a little bit. And I want to talk about that. They have shifted a little bit. We have now a woman in a leadership position in church setting. They're in a smaller church. I know personally I can reflect on this information. I attend a pretty decent large-sized church here in Rochester. And all of our leadership positions are all males. And before I started really kind of gathering information and subsequently seeking why women are not in a leadership position, made me reflect on my own personal church that I attend to. But we also see that smaller churches, they have more likely to have a female in leadership position than a larger church. And like I said too, it ponders you, and we'll talk about it. We'll talk about why is this a thing? Why are we gathering this information? What can be done? Do we need a macro intervention to kind of express the gender norms? I think it really starts with the biopsychosocial, spiritual gathering, because we look at the bio physically, a male has been traditionally in charge of a church setting. Socially, as we talked about, gender norms, social classes have a male setting and a religious setting. And then we also talk about self-regulation. A lot of times these traditional aspect of males are in that leadership role. And it all falls under the bubble for spirituality. We can gather information and we can see where we could use this needs assessment, more or less, to change societal views when it comes to religion and spirituality. But overall, religion has shifted. And I want to state that again, and we'll talk a little bit more about it, but religion is starting to shift. And for personally, I think it's for the better to have the opportunity to have a woman in a leadership position in a church setting. What physically has changed? One of the articles talked about COVID. COVID played a big role. I know personally, looking back in the COVID-19 times and during the pandemic, my church shut down. They shifted to an online setting. Enrollment went way down, and they actually had to close one of their other locations. But to go back to this idea of a woman in a church setting, over time, things have changed. As we talked about, traditionally, it's been that male figure in the religious setting. It's been that male that is giving speeches, and they're wonderful speeches, and it's been traditionally a male in charge. We didn't really hear too much about females. Now, I want to pause there for a minute. I do want to pause for a minute to kind of reflect on that. We normally had a male in a religious setting, in a leadership position. Females have played a role in churches. Now, I want to keep that again. I want to say that again. Females do play a role in churches. I actually know personally, one of my employments when I was working at a senior living home, I had a resident who was a nun. Loved it. And that is a leadership position. But to have that traditional head of the church, head of the parish, head of the chapel, it's been a male figure. So I did want to reflect a little bit there and just keep that very, very light. But women do play a role in this religion and spiritual setting. But I do also think that one of the articles, kind of getting back on this, one of the articles talked about COVID-19 and how much it's changed. We look at the pandemic and we've seen how churches have changed. Numbers are actually decreasing, one of the articles states. It's slowly starting to pick back up again. But for a while during the pandemic, churches were closed. People didn't feel safe attending churches. Or traditionally, you had some of the other churches that did not close. And, that's a story for another day on if they should have shut down during COVID. But once again, after this COVID pandemic has kind of shifted religion. Religion and spirituality has shifted with a increased number of females in a leadership position. One of the articles was stating that females are starting to feel more welcomed or engaged to participate in religion. We take this idea of that traditional realm that religion has always been a male figure, and we have seen how it has shifted. And I think that a lot of it came down to our religion and spiritual assessments with our biosocial psycho analysis that we've done. We talked about how much male's been traditionally in charge. Well, now things have changed since the COVID pandemic, and I also think that culture shifted. These cultural norms aren't as strict anymore. And you see how religion has shifted over time, has opened up areas for female leadership positions. And the last article that really played a role that I want to spend a little bit of time on is this idea of urban churches versus rural churches. Urban churches are more likely to have a female leadership. So a religious pastor of some type, a spiritual and religious setting, female is more likely to be in charge of that compared to a rural setting. And I think it stems back to traditional values. I know that my wife, I'm going to take a little personal step. My wife grew up in a very small town, and her church that she attended at the time, no female was in a leadership position. Now, I can't talk about today. I have no idea if they have a leadership position for females there or not. But this idea that urban churches are more likely as sustainable to have a female in a leadership position. I truly think it tends to turn to cultural norms and societal views. You know, we used to have this traditional route that women would attend church with their husbands, and the husbands or the pastor and the pastor's wife. And that was pushed through generations, this multi-generational approach. And nowadays, we do see a shift in that. We do see that females are in that position of leadership of some type. I think overall, there is this change in society. Now, we can't demonstrate what's going to happen in the future. We can't forecast if females are going to stay in this position. We can't forecast if females are going to have different viewpoints and be a different religion and spirituality altogether. But overall, we've seen this shift in cultural norms and society. And I truly think that it stems down to this idea that these traditional religious spirituality, cultural norms that we've talked about, has shifted throughout time. Now, I want to end on a little personal reflection through all this. The biggest takeaway that I truly think is something that we still need to work on is this overall idea of a female in a leadership position in a religious setting. Religiously, they've talked about a lot of times with Christianity, we'll take that specifically, that Jesus Christ is the head, male figure. We look at Buddhism. Buddhist is a male figure. I think that society, though, has viewed that a male needs to be in that role of a male figure. Now, I'm not saying that a female can't be in that position. If anything, I'm actually arguing the opposite. All I'm illustrating is the fact that throughout history and throughout times, we've had a male figure in charge of the religious and spiritual leadership positions. I think that with the shift of society and the shift of cultural norms and the shift of people today, women nowadays will be in a leadership position. I also wanted to reflect, the last thing I wanted to reflect on is this idea of social media. We see nowadays CEOs and big company representatives are now in a female setting. I truly think over time, religion and spirituality will also shift to have this female in this leadership position. I'd like to dive a little deeper with that, with the religion and spirituality when it comes to social media. We see how much things have changed, and it ties all together with our cultural norms. Social media has grown so much that back before social media, people didn't have updates on, church attendance and online services and all different religion, spirituality, viewpoints that they could have. Nowadays, everything's available right here on the computer. So you see this shift in society. You see this shift in cultural norms. You see this shift in religious and spirituality viewpoints. And overall, I truly think that this shift will gauge a new tradition with religion and spirituality. Thank you so much.